Welcome to the PHLY Sixers pregame show on a Sunday as the 76ers begin a two-game series in New York against the Knicks. Alongside my partner here for this evening, Kyle Neubeck. I'm Devon Givens. Brianna producing the show, and all of you out there in the chat getting ready for this, I guess, highly anticipated Atlantic Division matchup. Look, as bad as it has been, the Sixers is just 2 games back of the Knicks in the standings, as Kyle and I were talking about. But as you said, man, it just seems like way more than 2 in the standings.
It feels like 22.
Yeah, it really
right
does.
Now. It's, I have about as much energy as you would expect for a Sunday night Sixers-Knicks game with no Joel Embiid, no Tyrese Maxey, no DeAnthony Melton, no Robert Covington. The starters did just get announced.
Okay.
So
we have some things. We have some things to get into. But before we get there, let's welcome everybody in again. This is the Sixers pregame show presented by our great sponsors here from Coors Light. Visit CoorsLight.com/Sixers to get Coors Light delivered or find a store nearest you. All right, man. Well, you have the starters. You want to throw the starters, and then we'll get to the inactives and all of that stuff and key matchups of the game. What do we have for the starters?
I'm not too pleased with it. It's Kyle Lowry, Cam Payne, Oubre, Tobias, and Mo Bamba.
So Buddy Hield coming off the bench for the first time.
It's certainly a decision.
Wow.
So maybe this is a good jumping off point for. We've seen Buddy struggle, right? Mm-hmm. And the reasons for that are myriad, right? Like, he's a guy that will be better off of Joel Embiid, who is definitely better off of Tyrese Maxey, using the attention other guys get and weaponizing that, and the type of actions they can run are limited as a result of who's in and who's out. But on top of that, so I could see, you could justify when they're at full strength bringing him off the bench. Nick Nurse also doesn't seem to have a ton of confidence in Buddy right now for whatever reason. He did justify moving Kelly to the bench previously to say, hey, we're going to feature him more. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Maybe that's part of it. But I don't know what he's seen in the Lowry campaign combo that suggests that's where we need to go. I think individually Lowry and Payne have had their ups and downs, but they've mostly been what we've expected or better. I just think you can't defend basically anyone or anything. It compounds all your rebounding problems. And then on top of that, the Mo Bamba starting thing is just I don't know why we have to continue to be subjected to this. They're bringing in, maybe they already did. I'm actually not sure about this. There was a report that they were going to bring in Kai Jones for a workout. Shams Charania at The Athletic reported that. And I'm not casting any aspersions on Mr. Jones, who maybe he's got his head on straight now. Maybe he's focused on the right things, but you guys can see for yourselves on the old internet and YouTube, and
so a lot of it during the summer.
A quick search, he was pretty out there, and it's why he is not currently employed by team. So if the Sixers are saying, "Hey, we want to bring in Kai Jones and give him a look,"
some desperation there.
That says a lot about how they feel about Mo Bamba, because Paul Reed's overextended, right? But at least they feel good about him as that's a solid backup. I don't know why Mo is getting these, starting opportunities. It's not like he's doing a whole hell of a lot with them.
And at this point, we can't sit there and say that Nick Nurse is still trying to light a fire under Paul Reed, because if that was the case, that's already been done, because he's been playing pretty well since coming off the bench with Mo Bamba in that starting role. But it just seems like this is a Jermaine Jones type starting role where you're in for the first 5 minutes for that reason alone, just to fill a starting spot, knock down a 3, have a couple of good defensive plays, maybe from Mo Bamba in this case, maybe get a block shot, a putback dunk or a dunk in general, a couple of personal fouls to go along with it, and then you're yanked from the basketball game and we don't see much of him going forward. But it is still bizarre, because if that was the message for Paul Reed, that has been answered. So now we're looking at the Knicks in this case, and you're playing the New York Knicks. You can use Paul Reed immediately in this game to kind of set that tone, to not fall behind, because if there are a few mistakes that happen there with Mo Bamba, sure, you can have those same mistakes with Paul Reed, but for what we have seen as of late, you at least like to have the better center coming in to start the game right away to give you an opportunity to do something. And Mo Bamba's not doing enough where you're sitting there saying,
No.
you deserve to be in that starting five to hold things down until Paul Reed comes in. That is not what we have been seeing. So.
Yeah, look, there's a difference, Devon, to your point, where Paul has his limitations and he's struggled at times, and we all sit here and say, yeah, he's not qualified to be a starter that plays 30-plus minutes. And then there's Mo Bamba, who's like, is he qualified to play real NBA minutes, period? Like, Paul came into the game the other night, and his energy inspired the crowd, inspired some of his teammates. Like, they're playing hard when Paul Reed comes into the game, and he's got some genuine utility, right? Like, Mo Bamba is a player in theory only, right? Like, he's a big body, and at times, look, I'm not going to sit here and say he hasn't had any good moments, right? But I think the body of work is clear to this point. So I don't get that. And then the backcourt is the bigger one for me. But we'll see if Buddy responds to this well, and maybe Nick envisions him taking more of the on-ball creation responsibilities coming off the bench. Because when he first got here, he's running a lot of offense, right? Mm-hmm. He's running pick and rolls with Paul Reed, and maybe those two will be attached a bit more this way. I'm just trying to figure out why Nick Nurse would do it, but I don't think there are a ton of great answers or compelling answers, I guess I would say.
And I guess it's also more of he's just trying to find something to work for this basketball team. Right now, the big story, of course, Buddy Hield coming off the bench, but the bigger story, Tyrese Maxey missing his 4th consecutive game, still dealing with the concussion symptoms, if you will, the mild concussion protocol that we're looking at here with him. But that's now 4 games. And after him going through the Friday night workout before that game at home, there was still, a possibility maybe that, hey, he would be cleared and good to go. He was at practice yesterday. You saw a video of him being out there at practice, going through a workout once again. But if he's not playing again to this evening to start off this 2-game series against the Knicks, Kyle, there was still something there that is just not good enough for the Sixers and maybe even for Tyrese Maxey to say, all right, I'm ready to go.
Yeah, so I did warn you guys when we talked on Friday, when gave the Maxey update, that Nick Nurse sounded optimistic, but there have been a lot of times this year where Nick Nurse would say something and say, hey, this guy looks like he's trending in the right direction, and then that player goes on to miss a game or two. So I'm starting to learn that maybe I shouldn't put all my stock in Nick Nurse's injury updates. And that's not a criticism of him, right? Like, he's dealing with what's being passed on to him by the medical staff. And concussion protocol is the concussion protocol, right? If you don't get through every step, you simply can't play. Now, what I don't know at this point, and I wasn't up in New York tonight, obviously, for the pregame discussion, I don't know where he's at in terms of the steps of the protocol, right? Like, we saw him go through a full on-court workout Friday evening before that debacle of a first half. And that would suggest that he's pretty far along in the process. So I don't know what the final hurdle is that he has to clear here. So I hope that he's able to play Tuesday. I do know that he is with the team in New York, so it's not like he's, in a dark room,
some shades on.
The blackout curtains are down, and he's listening to like Enya or something, just trying to shut himself off from the universe and avoid anything that'll hurt his head too much. If we wanted to go full conspiracy brain mode, we could say that really loud guitar lick during pregame shoot around rattled his brain like everybody else's. No,
great job.
I'm not being serious.
National anthem guitars, but it was loud.
It was very loud. So,
but the one thing we do know, with all the questions of when he will get back, how his workout went to decide that he was not only not going to play on Friday, but even after going through his workout on Saturday at practice, he did not play today, even though he's with the basketball team. The thing that we do know is that they're not all that good without him. We know about the fact that you have no Embiid, but you can still have enough with another all-star and the complementary players that you have, where you can still compete in games and win those games. But seeing him for the last 4 games, and certainly seeing how things went on Friday night at home against a bad Memphis team where you get down. I mean, pardon me, a bad. Who was it? No, it wasn't. Yeah, it was Memphis. No, it was New Orleans on Friday. A
Yes.
playoff team, a much better basketball team, but a team where you shouldn't have got down by 35 in that first half the way that they
Right.
did.
It's one thing to underperform a little bit. It's another to get completely
So we know they're not good.
Yeah.
They're not that good without him. Kyle, I don't know how many, as I said jokingly at the top, they're still only 2 games back of the New York Knicks, but they have already dropped the first 2 against New York in this 4-game season series. The next 2 are tonight and Tuesday, both in New York, and that will be a full 4 games plus any tiebreakers should they lose these games, Kyle. Him being out is a huge deal tonight because, again, this will break any sort of tie that if they don't win this game, any sort of tie that they could have if we're looking at seedings in the next couple of weeks, totally out the window if they don't win this one and certainly the next one.
Yeah, there's no margin for error. And unfortunately, as we continue to wait for a formal Joel Embiid update, which, just to be clear to everyone, I know I get asked about it every single day in our Discord, in the chat, on Twitter, in person when people are talking to me. Everyone wants to know why there's no Joel update. All I can tell you is that there's a reason when teams put out injury updates and say this person had surgery and they give a timeline, it always says approximately.
Yes.
It is never he had a surgery on February 6th. On March 6th, we will give an update on his timeline at 3:00 p.m. Like, I get it. Everyone wants to know. I still continue to think that it's not bad news that they haven't said anything. Joel talking publicly was obviously the big signal to me that things are progressing, and he said that himself. So take that for whatever it's worth. The Maxey thing now is getting a little concerning just because this has gone from, he's able to go back in. He got cleared to come back in. And then it was a mild concussion, and now this is at least 4 games that he's missed. We could get to 5, depending on what happens between now and Tuesday night. I want to continue to be optimistic about it based on what Nick Nurse has said, how Tyrese has looked, and just, basic knowledge of a mild concussion, I suppose. But it's really hard to say. Now, the good news for them, I guess, is that some of the teams around them are not playing their best basketball right now. Like, Indy has been super up and down. We were talking earlier or before the show, Devon, and the Pacers were getting smacked around by Orlando to open the game. Mm-hmm. Flip side of that is Orlando's another team ahead of them that they have to pass. So Orlando winning doesn't help them a whole hell of a lot. They have to find, Nick Nurse actually put it this way when we were talking to him after Friday's game. And I told you guys that he was pretty pissed off after the game. He said, when I came into this Joel-less stretch, I said, this is a important time for evaluation purposes. Like, I'm going to learn a lot about our guys and our combinations and what have you. And that's basically all he can do, right? Like, I don't think he comes in every night. Certainly he's doing everything he can to help them win, but I don't think he comes in expecting to win most of these games, right? It's much more about, okay, who are my guys I really trust that are potential candidates to be in a 9-10 man playoff rotation in April. And that's really all you can figure out are, of the guys remaining who are healthy enough to play, and it's not a ton of them, who actually will survive once you cut down and say, goodbye to the two-way guys, goodbye to one of the small guards, likely Campaign, goodbye Mo Bamba. That's all we're figuring out right now. That's a pretty dire circumstance to be in on March 10th with 18 games to go?
Yeah, 19 now.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So, and with it, as we look at this, because you have a slim chance with no Tyrese Maxey out there on the floor. Jalen Brunson is back for the New York Knicks, and while they still, we talked about the inactives for the Sixers. no Julius Randle, OG Anunoby, and still no Mitchell Robinson for the New York Knicks, but they do have their all-star in Jalen Brunson. Dante DiVincenzo has played well. Josh Hart has played well for them, and so many others. We're looking at backup big men. Jericho Sims will come in, and I saw someone put up there have 12 rebounds in the chat.
He's going to put Mo Bamba in a body bag on the glass.
Right. So, they have a number of players, and they have a number of role players that are still better than your role players right now. You're on their home floor. They're fighting for their playoff lives. They're trying to hold off the same teams that you're trying to hold off of. So while they have that 2-game lead so far in this 4-game series, they're holding off Orlando and Miami and Indiana. And while they're playing today against the Sixers, so are Miami. Kyle already mentioned Indiana and Orlando going head-to-head in this one. So they're doing the very same thing that the Sixers are trying to do. So this is important for this basketball team, for Nick Nurse to try to find something, and getting off to a slow start like they did against New Orleans is just not acceptable for that to happen tonight. He even mentioned, I was reading something on the tweet where he mentioned a soft approach of how that first half went.
Yeah.
He called his team soft in that first half. Rightfully so. They cannot afford to do that again against this New York Knicks team because they will jump on them too. They jumped on them full staff in the past where they've played against this New York Knicks team, and that cannot happen this evening in New York if they're trying to do anything and make any kind of statement, not only to the Knicks or anybody else, but just themselves in the locker room, that we can beat basketball teams, we can compete. And if Tyrese Maxey is not there, whenever he does come back, he still has to, as we keep talking about getting back and ramping up, this is going to be 4 games now that he's missed. If he even plays on Tuesday, who's to say that he's not going to have to, because everything else that he's missed games for have been for different reasons. This is a concussion situation where maybe it's the lighting when he's running up the floor, even though New York has that dark theater lighting around the seats shining really bright on the floor. Maybe the lights will bother him quickly. Maybe a bump might bother him on that particular night because he's not getting a bump.
We're in dark times
They're
right now.
in dark times. So anything could trigger anything for Tyrese Maxey where he might not be himself when he takes the floor for the first time following his concussion protocol clearance to get back for an actual basketball game. So this is serious stuff for them tonight. They're lucky that the other teams are losing around them for them to still be right there, tied for 6 with Miami, 2 games back of New York. But with New York playing them, that's a different story for 2 straight games. Indiana and Orlando in front of them. The whole jockeying, we did this the other day for our show where we talked about the play-in possibility and what we really need to be focusing on right now. And after we did it, I saw so many others talking about the very same thing because this is a real thing. It's an important thing with 19 games remaining. So let's get to our key matchups for this one right now. No Maxey, but the new backcourt is going to be very interesting with no Buddy Hield. You're going to have Kyle Lowry and Campaign starting against, presume, I haven't seen it yet, but I'm guessing that it is Dante DiVincenzo and Jalen Brunson in the backcourt. So that's a big matchup right there because defensively, Kyle Lowry has had that reputation. We've already explained so far that he is no longer that really, really good all NBA type of defensive player that we've seen in the past that would really dog people. He knows Jalen and Dante, their games very well. Knowing it is one thing, being able to go out there and slow it down is another. Campaign, not known for his defense. He will give the effort, but he's also a smaller guard too, where sometimes you might see Dante on the low block and might want to take him down to the weight room and shoot over him. So what are some of the key matchups that you see in this one? Buddy Hield coming off the bench, is there something there where you're looking at him coming off a bench versus their backcourt, their reserves? What are you looking for here tonight?
Well, one, are we sure that one of the guards will actually be the defender on Brunson? Because to your point, I think, peak Kyle Lowry, sure, yeah, he's guarding the other team's point guard. But,
that's the assignment.
But now he's more of his value on defense is created through off ball, reading the game, drawing charges, positioning, and things like that. It's not keeping up with guys who are real deal scorers, guys who are self-creators, who can take you off the dribble, create for others, do all that. So, how do they handle that? What do they do there? I guess Oubre is their best potential matchup there, and I don't really love that. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. the big thing for me is, what does the second unit look like? And how does Nurse construct the team with Buddy coming off the bench, with Paul Reed, with Batum, and kind of who fills in around them? You know, like KJ Martin seems to have a leg up on Ricky and some of the other guys on the bench right now. I can't say I really understand that. I don't think KJ's been that good as a wing. And I would look, Ricky also, as much as, you know, we've been supporters of him on this show, he hasn't been great either. But KJ's been in the league and has played a ton of minutes, a ton of games, and just has been who he is. If you want to keep toying with these small ball lineups, I'd be interested to see that. Like, can KJ and a slim down group take advantage of a Knicks team that doesn't have Mitchell Robinson, right? Like, they have some good bigs on that team. Hartenstein's good. Jericho Sims, an active glass crasher, but they're not like dominant post players or isolation guys where you're going to throw them the ball and say, go score if you play small. So I want to see, and Nick has tried to be creative. Certainly playing Payne and Lowry is quote unquote creative, if you're going to use a term to describe it. But yeah, we're grasping at straws here. One of the things I saw in the chat that I want to touch on real quick, there's some debate on whether seeding matters. I know like the play-in and everything else has been a big topic, and there's been some back and forth amongst the chat here tonight. I don't know that it matters so much as like Joel being healthy is the most important thing. I do think it kind of matters in that it's a reflection of how coherent of a team are they between now and when Joel comes back. And then on top of that, I just don't believe as a team you can go for 2 months and not play real basketball. Like, some of these games are just complete nonsense, and guys being able to do mostly what they want. Like, this is not a shot at Kelly Oubre. He has needed to be a volume guy. But Kelly Oubre, there's going to be real whiplash when Joel and Tyrese are back and they have basically the full team, and he's having to slide back into the role that they want and need him to play with the full group. Like, I don't want these habits to be ingrained where some guys are taking a lot of plays off on defense that Joel would give them an earful. And again, no disrespect to Kyle Lowry, but when Kyle Lowry's yelling at someone right now, it just simply doesn't mean as much as Joel Embiid, who is driving the team to wins and anchoring the defense and leading by example in so many ways. So I don't think seeding is the biggest deal in the world, right? They don't want to have to play Boston until as deep as they can get in the playoffs, but that's really the only thing I think actually matters. But we can't just be like, well, they're going to lose, 3/4 of their games between now and late March, and that's going to have no material impact on the team. And it's just like, it's bad habit building, not because these guys are trying to necessarily, but they have to figure some things out here. They can't just be a rudderless ship for the better part of 2 months and then think that, oh, Joel's back, all of a sudden we're just an elite team again. I don't believe that to be the case.
The other part is when you're asking, as Kyle just mentioned, being off for 2 months and having to get back however many games Embiid plays, if he does come back at the end of the month or the start of April before the postseason begins, their postseason is going to begin maybe potentially earlier than usual because of the play-in factor.
Don't get that week off.
They've never been there. And secondly, when they do finish that play-in situation, should they compete in that, whether they're 7, 8, 9, or 10, they're doing so on the road as a low seed. And you want to avoid Boston. Kyle talked about that. 7 seed. It's probably going to be Milwaukee, in my opinion. Cleveland is there right now, tied with the Bucks, but I'm still putting Milwaukee in that number 2 spot. And then you're looking at what happens there from 3, 4 on down. It's a big difference from playing Milwaukee and Boston to playing Cleveland, New York, or even Miami for that matter, or Orlando. If they hung in there and stuck in there, you probably want that. So maybe you can push to that. I think most people will be trying to push to that 5 seed if Orlando ends up with that 4 seed because they're looking at a first-time playoff squad, young players.
Yes.
They're very, very young, and they may not know how to win they don't because they haven't been there. So we can't ignore the fact that they're going to be on the road unless it's a matchup where you feel really good about where they would be. So while seeding may not matter, let's not just flat out ignore it, because they will begin on the road. And if they're a play-in team, they're going to be doing something that we haven't seen them compete in just yet. So that's going to be important. So the starters tonight for the Knicks, though, we talked about Brunson and DiVincenzo. Josh Hart gets to start at the small forward spot. Precious Achiuwa at the power forward position. And Isaiah Hartenstein will be the center for the Knicks. And we know that he can put a body on a lot of guys and get those rebounds, man. So Mo Bamba is going to have his work cut out for him very early. So I wonder if that's something that Nick Nurse was looking at. Paul Reed versus Jericho Sims coming off the bench, maybe a little bit more, where Mo Bamba against Jericho Sims, while the leaping ability and the height, at least Paul Reed is going to be an active body at that 5 spot. All right, that's a couple of best bets here in this one tonight, now that we know what the starting lineup is going to be. But
give me the Knicks by whatever the line is.
Off the bench. Buddy Hield coming off the bench, though, is very interesting to me, with Hield coming off the bench against the Knicks second unit. And again, the Sixers starting 5 will be Mo Bamba once again, Tobias Harris in the front court with him, alongside, is it Nick Batum Kelly Oubre at the 3, and then you have Kyle Lowry and Cam Payne in the backcourt. That's the interesting one there. But for this one, for the Sixers, as I look at these numbers right now, the Knicks are a 7-point favorite right now. Kyle said, "Give you whatever.
I'll
take whatever.
I'll take that
too. Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
Give me the Knicks."
But Buddy Hield coming off the bench. Let me throw that first one at you. 11.5 coming off the bench. I'm guessing with this one, it's going to be more of a free-flowing type of thing where he has an opportunity.
I think I'm going to take the over, because I think it's a demotion, at least temporarily, and he will more than likely be motivated. We're probably overdue for a big Buddy shooting game at the very least, and to the point we mentioned earlier, I do think this probably signals that he's going to be used on ball more, because when you use because Jeff Doughton has been playing some point guard, so he'll probably play some minutes with him tonight. But when you're playing him with a two-way guy, more than likely, rather than one of the veteran point guards on the team, probably going to ask Buddy to run more offense, so he'll be able to attack more off the dribble. Whether that's a good thing for the Sixers or not is up for debate, but I do think it'll probably get Buddy going, so I'll take the over on that one.
All right, also with points, I'll throw Jalen Brunson at you, 28.5, his second game back from the knee scare that he had a few weeks ago, and he's played pretty well against the Sixers, so 28.5 is the number against the Sixers. He might not even have to play that much in this one if we look at it, but 28.5 is the over-under. What are you looking at there?
I think I'm going to go over.
Really? I mean, who's going to stop him?
It's really a matter of how long he plays and if we think he's banged up at all. But it's already back and played well the other night. So.
Yeah, absolutely right. All right,
where's the Tobias Harris line at?
You want the points? 18.5.
I think I'm going over on him because he's in New York. It's a national game, so he has to trick all the announcers that that's what he did in Dallas, right? Like he had a monster game.
That's true.
And so Stan Van Gundy, who I think is like the biggest, well, this is an ESPN game, but Stan Van Gundy, who's like the biggest Tobias Harris fan walking the earth, will see this game, be like, he's such an important part of that team, and then not watch the 4 games afterward where he scores like 12, 11, 10, and 12 points.
Yeah.
So I'll take the over for Tobias as well.
All right. I'm going to go with the under for the Brunson, 28.5, because I think maybe DiVincenzo would get off in this one a little bit. Also, Miles McBride came off the bench in one of the previous games here in Philadelphia, went nuts for a stretch there as well. So I'll give Jalen Brunson the under, and especially coming back from the knee. But prediction time, we already said the over-under of 7. By the way, Al asked what Sims' over-under is for rebounds, 13. No, it's actually.
I don't think it's that.
It's actually 5.5. But I would predict
slam the over.
I would predict that over for the 5.5. Predictions, though, we said the over of 7. I'll go with this one. Knicks by 12 in this one in a home win.
I'll take them by 15. And I
Okay.
want to make sure before we get out of here, we had some love from Brazil.
Did we?
João Pedro. Says,
Okay.
we are going to get the W tonight. You guys are the best. Thank you, buddy.
We appreciate it.
Appreciate it. And we
Thanks for
appreciate
checking
everybody
in.
else for coming in and hanging out with us tonight.
To our Philadelphia PHLY Sixers pregame show presented by Coors Light. Visit CoorsLight.com/Sixers to get Coors Light delivered or find a store near you. We'll be back after the game for our normal postgame here on the PHLY Sixers postgame show. So we thank all of you for hanging out with us. Make sure you come back postgame. Tell all your friends to check in as well. Maybe we're talking about a W. We predicted against Dallas that they would lose.
Maybe we'll be yelling about the Oscars instead. You never know. Maybe a movie wins that none of us like, and we can say, what the hell are those stupid Hollywood people thinking?
Absolutely. So we'll talk to you postgame for Colin, Devon, and Brianna. We'll talk to you postgame after Sixers Knicks. Thanks.
We all silly like the mayor.